Hello, my name's Bob. I'm a member of St James New Barnet and I'd like to share a thought with you over the next few minutes. One of the lighter aspects of the lockdown has been our ability to see inside people's homes, and there's been a lot of talk about the books that you see on people's bookshelves. I've chosen a more bland background today because I don't really want this competition of you looking at all the books on the bookshelf. But don't worry, when we can all get together again, you're very welcome to come round and browse through them all. When we welcome visitors into our home, we want it to look good, partly because we don't want to be regarded as Mr. and Mrs. Messy, and partly because we respect the people who come to visit. We want them to feel welcome and comfortable. We want them to have the best and the best food that we can reasonably lay on and that sort of thing. And it's in thinking about that, reflecting on that my mind goes back to the story of Martha and Mary, which when I first heard it a number of years ago, of course, kind of struck home. And it's always been in my mind ever since. So to join that story, we find Jesus and the disciples having returned to Jerusalem from Galilee, where they'd been teaching for some time. And they thought, why don't we pop over to Bethany and have a chat with Martha and with Mary. Bethany was a small village just outside Jerusalem, I guess about the distance that High Barnet would be from St James Church. And so we read about the story of that encounter in Luke chapter 10, and verse 38 onwards tell us, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Now, we can have some sympathy with Martha's view here. Here was a very important visitor that had dropped in with little or no warning, and she wanted to do the best for him. The pressure was really on. I think about when we opened the Docklands Light Railway in the mid-1980s and we had the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh come. We wanted to show them respect, and so we had a depot full of flowers and tables, and it looked absolutely wonderful. It was good for the cameras as well. So if we went to all that trouble for the Queen, then how much more would one want to do for Jesus? So we have sympathy with the way that Martha reacted. But I suspect Jesus' answer to her question rather took her aback, because Jesus said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Now, it wasn't that what Martha had done was wrong. It wasn't bad. These things probably had to be done. But she rather missed the point. Her priorities were rather wrong. She was busy fussing away in the kitchen, making sure everything was spot on and perfect, running around doing these things. Mary was sitting with Jesus, no doubt deep in conversation, no doubt benefiting from that discussion enormously, which Martha missed out on. I've no doubt that Martha went away and thought long and hard about what Jesus had said, and that rather surprising reaction. She must have pondered it at some length. I think that because one of the reasons this story sticks in my mind so much is that I'm inclined to be a bit of a Martha myself. I can easily fall into that way of thinking. I don't particularly want to, but I have to steer myself away from it consciously and positively. So Martha was actually put to the test not very long afterwards, because their brother Lazarus, as we know, fell ill, and the sisters, Martha and Mary, knowing of Jesus' powers, sent for him to come and help. Jesus' reaction wasn't really much of a reaction at all to begin with, as far as they could see it anyway. He was rather laid back. He didn't come for some long time. And in that time, Martha began to panic. She went rushing out to find Jesus and had to tell him, look, things aren't going too well. Please hurry and please come along. Understandable, of course. But we also read in John 11 that both Martha and Mary knew who Jesus was. They'd reaffirmed that. They were placing their faith in him. And they did actually have faith that although he was coming late, he was still going to do something. And of course he did. And it's that faith in Jesus and the knowledge that Jesus can do anything through us and with us that is really the story of the New Testament. And to my mind, it's very much focused in the words of the Great Commission. And in Matthew 28, we read about the 11 remaining disciples. This is after the resurrection. And Jesus met them at the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. They saw him, they worshipped him, some still doubted. And then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely, he adds, I am with you always to the very end of the age. Now, in the Great Commission, Jesus is talking to those 11 disciples. He's also talking to us. Just think about the power in that last phrase. Surely, says Jesus, I am with you always to the very end of the age. Wow, what does that say to us? How does that make us feel? I know how it makes me feel every time I read it. Now, it's Pentecost. And we know very well the story that was told at the beginning of Acts chapter 2. And the disciples were there, and suddenly it got extremely windy, and there were tongues of fire, and they all started talking in strange languages, real languages, but strange languages. So much so that the crowd came around to see what was going on. In those few moments, the world changed forever. And we now live in that part of the world, that part of the journey, that Jesus is part of our lives, is part of us. We are filled with the Spirit. We don't need to worry about all those odd details, go to bed thinking about them at 3 a.m. and that sort of thing. We just have to trust Jesus. The detail is important. Our life in church is important in that the PCC has to be there, the church building has to be there, but we don't let these things drive us. Our mind must be on greater things, the things that we have been commissioned to do. And so that's the lesson with Martha, a good woman, with her faults, of course, like we all have. Too much focus on the detail, putting that as a priority rather than thinking of the big picture and the things that we really need to think of. That's a lesson that story really, really teaches us, and we can remember that, as I have, forever. Thank you.